Welcome to AI Master's Voice, where we bring you insightful conversations that demystify AI and its transformative impact on business. Today, we're continuing our discussion with Lana Makarova. If you missed the first part of our conversation, you can click on the corner of this video to catch up on episode 5, where we discussed the critical role of the head of AI and the importance of having a clear, strategic approach to AI adoption. In this episode, we delve deeper into the challenges of aligning AI teams with business goals and how leaders can bridge the communication gap between technical and executive teams. We'll explore practical ways to ensure AI projects align with business objectives, helping organizations get the most from their AI initiatives. Lana shares her unique insights on why alignment, defined objectives, and human oversight are essential to avoid common pitfalls and realize AI's full potential. And I'm your host, Martin Jokub, founder of AI Masters Agency. If you're passionate about understanding the intersection of AI and business and want to learn from leaders like Lana, this conversation is packed with actionable insights you won't want to miss. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit that bell button for notifications on future episodes. So, Lana, welcome back to AI Master's Voice. Let's dive in.
The big challenge I see is what the people who run businesses and need to have those solutions often don't speak the same language with AI people. This can make it hard to use AI in the best possible way. And we need to find out how to help these two groups to understand each other better. So in your work, how do you help AI experts and business leaders to talk to each other better? And what's your advice for making sure they are on the same page?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it comes down to alignment. Everyone kind of has to be at the same level of understanding. So one, there's the technical know-how. So understanding what the heck the scientists or the technical experts are talking about. So I think this is why it's really important for the business leaders to have understanding about AI, but I think we've talked about, the level of understanding is going to be at a higher level. So you kind of have to understand from the conversation what the teams are talking about from a capability standpoint. So, when they're talking about machine learning, we're talking about prediction. If we're talking about clustering and, when these terminology are kind of thrown around, you just need to, and I think from a business executive standpoint, pick the themes and translate them into capabilities, these schemas that enable them to ask the right questions. And I think this is kind of the lens that I also come into the work. I am not a technical leader in my work and the teams that I lead in these initiatives. But when I do join these discussions, I know enough to ask the right questions. Some of these discussions do get quite technical and geeky, and you just have to kind of pick the themes and understand, okay, well, what is the trend and where is the team kind of going? And I think when maybe elevating at a higher level, so who's even at the discussion table? So when you're kind of in the early stages of defining a project, you do need 3, I would say, groups of teams or basically representations of talent at the discussion table. So, and it's really important for them to kind of, again, have a foundational understanding of at minimum of AI and what we're kind of talking about, and the business objective. So what problem are we even trying to solve? So again, that alignment is very necessary, but you're going to have your leadership who is going to be setting the expectations for the objectives to be solved and the driver of the kind of this initiative. So what are we trying to do? Are we trying to create new value for the organization or create more efficiency in the business? You have the SMEs, so people who you are bringing in to basically transform their current process or their current products. So they really hold the on-the-ground knowledge for how things are basically executed, right? So you're not just dreaming up these use cases and think, oh, well, theoretically, this is how it's going to work. People on the ground who are actually on the business side executing this work need to really represent the work and kind of the reality of it happening. And then you have the technical experts. So the technical experts are going to be your data scientists, tech leads, and folks and architects who are going to really take those different pieces, but then they're going to translate the how. So how do we actually enable them, these things to be done? So again, one of the things, and I think this is, everyone has the responsibility at the table to understand, to make sure that everyone's aligned. So same thing with the technical experts. It does take, and it took me a little bit of time even working with the teams that I lead even today, is to make sure they don't, when you have leadership at the table, when you have those SMEs, you don't get into the algorithm talk. You don't talk about feature engineering. You don't talk about the data engineering specifics. You elevate your jargon to a higher level so that it resonates and it moves the discussions forward. And very likely the same way, you can't also be very kind of high level business oriented talk and not have expectations for you to have some knowledge of AI to be able to, again, understand. Well, you don't want to also delegate the entire process to someone else and say like, okay, well, you guys just go do it and then come back when it's done. No, you also have a seat at the decision-making table because you're the one that's committing your funding, you're committing your budget, and you're one of the stakeholders. And ultimately, it comes up to you to communicate it further, right? So you have to take that, your learnings and what's basically decided at the table upwards to, other stakeholders to seek alignment. So I think having kind of some, I want to say like an equal level playing field of understanding as to what is the problem that we're trying to solve and then how we're going to get there at a high level, and to be able to build a strategy to estimate the ROI, to understand how this could be done, what's the timeline, and what's the really impact to the organization for you to be able to then communicate it upwards. Hopefully I kind of tackled that question in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes. I have additional question because you were talking about two groups. Yeah, like one group like technical engineers, machine learning engineers, data scientists, and others in the tech field talking to the business executives. Let's say it this way. But
Yep.
where are you? You are in the middle, as I understand, and you are,
Correct.
let's call as a moderator or
Correct.
head of AI. Yeah. So
Yes.
basically you act as a moderator between those two groups and you need to understand both languages and
Correct.
understand how to translate from one language, business language, to the technical and vice versa, from the technical to, and
Yeah.
know when to jump in and stop or add additional value to the conversation. So maybe
Right.
you can share some of your experience, how in the daily life it's happening. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't know, maybe some like funny stories you had, and I don't know, maybe you remember something pop up in the head.
So I think that there's two levels. So one is kind of like higher level strategy and kind of planning that happens. So even figuring out what initiatives we're going to fund and what solutions we're going to build. So you do have someone like me, that is the middle person that's understands the perspective of the business leaders, but then also understands where, let's say, the pushback comes from the IT group, and to be able for them to speak the same language and not to get into too technical or too business kind of jargon, so that everyone's kind of talking the same time. So I'm almost like the translator sometimes. It's like, okay, when they say this, they mean this, and this is the implication you need to consider. Yeah, I think that there's just been multiple times that I've been part of conversations where, the conversations get heated between the two groups because they don't really are not speaking the same language. And it's not that they're maybe even saying the same thing, but in different ways. And it's really important for someone like a connector like myself to be like, okay, well, you guys are basically saying the same thing, but you're just using different terminology to kind of conversate. So those are the discussions again at the planning stages, kind of higher level. You have the stakeholders at the table and you're planning the strategy for the entire kind of initiative. You have the implementations that are happening on the ground as well to consider as you're kind of executing kind of those projects. You're going to have that type of representation on the team as well, because very much the same. You have the business angle. So it's someone who speaks to the business needs, to the business objectives, the metrics behind the initiatives, building out the roadmaps. So product managers are typically the ones that kind of drive and represent the needs of the users. And then you have your technical experts who are helping architect that solution and really, drive the implementation. There's typically a role of, a technical business analyst or a product owner who is basically that conduit between the two. They're the ones who are taking the strategy, basically the business objectives, the roadmaps and things like that. And they work daily with the technical teams to translate business into the technical requirements, then the technical team can go and run with. Again, it's happening at multiple levels, but it is so important for you to have that. Otherwise, you're going to have the business talk to the technical team, and then they're going to interpret it in one way. They're going to go off and do something and interpret it in one way, come back to the table, bring you a product, and you'll be like, that's not what I meant. So I think it's, having some person in the room to be able to kind of represent both sides is really key, both from, again, like when you're talking about strategy and you're planning these initiatives, these use cases, but then also when you're kind of doing the implementation, it's so important to have a representative role like that to be able to, again, be the conduit between the business and the technical.
And you reminded me just recent conversation with my business partner, Paul. He's more, let's say, technical person, and I'm more, let's say, business person, but we both from both worlds, let's say this way. But we find it out recently what one word or two words, what we said, they meant to us different directions. And we find it out just after the month, like, oh, we're building a little bit differently, but why? I said this word. Yeah, so I understood in this way. I said, no, I meant in that way. But the word was the same. And just because I had this experience, and especially in marketing, when you're talking with clients and you're saying some words, I figure it out what people, even using the same words, they understand it differently, like audience targeting. One person who works with exact targeting in specific channels, they just think about the filtering, like how we will target the right audience. And the business side talks in general about targeting the audience. The wording is the same, but the meaning is totally different. And this is, I learned it hard way, but it helped me in the current, just last week this happened, and we figured out, oh my God, we were talking about two different things. And like the whole architecture of the project, what we're building now, become a little bit different, and we wasted a lot of resources and time on building one thing instead of another, what was much simpler. And anyway, we kind of already done it. This is what we learned, and I said, okay, next time let's talk and build maybe even the prototypes even for each other. Do we really understand the same way? If yes, everything's fine, we can go further. If no, okay, at least we can talk about this. And sometimes, you try to save time, save money, save resources just to get there. And sometimes you need to spend a little bit more time to just communicate. So,
absolutely. And I think that it's really a powerful time investment. Like it's worth the, spending an extra few days just to get that alignment, to make sure that you're kind of going in the same direction. And I feel like, I do this with clients and teams as well, to make sure that, hey, when you say this, it means this. And is everyone aligned? And until we are all kind of aligned as to where we're headed together, we can't move forward, because again, everyone's going to come bring in a different angle to it. But what if, there's this angle? So until everyone's kind of aligned, and the power also from that comes with during the implementation too. If you kind of drive that vision, then you have to align it to the implementation teams as well. So you take strategy to the implementation teams. Everyone kind of understands that when you say, we're trying to meet this business objective, we're trying to solve this problem, the team feels empowered to continue the work whenever you're not there. So it's like you can go on, let's say, a week's vacation. The work doesn't have to stop because you're aligned, and they can take a chance of, moving the work forward one step because they're aligned to you. And they're like, yeah, I think that this is basically based on what we aligned on. This is probably the right direction and how we should be kind of thinking about this. And so when you come back, it's just better alignment, as you've mentioned. Like it's not worth spending an extra month kind of, second guessing each other and like feeling like, oh, maybe it is, maybe it's not. It's just easier to do that work up front so that you're not wasting those efforts. And one of the things that I've kind of, so I had a child a year and a half ago. And one of the projects that I was leading, and everyone's we had a roadmap for where we're headed. And so I was out for a couple of months, and there was someone to replace some of the work that I was kind of overseeing, but one of the compliments that I received was like, boy, was the team aligned to what the heck your roadmap, how clear it was, that there wasn't much kind of alignment that needed to be happening. The team was just kind of headed in that direction. And when I came back, they were able to do the work exactly what I intended, because again, we aligned on those initiatives first. When those business objectives, they knew what the expectations were. And when I came back like a few months later, it didn't feel like we lost time. We only kind of gained momentum because the team had that kind of the power and the alignment to continue that work forward. So it's just so important to get that alignment initially. Totally worth the time invested.
And this alignment doesn't come just like a gift or every time. I believe it took time till you got how to align the team.
And that's fine, when you're doing the strategy, right? So when you're kind of aligning on the objectives, you're solutioning. When you're doing experimentation initially with these, initial use cases. And one thing that maybe we'll talk about either this podcast or maybe sometime in the future, but you can't build for production either. So there's a good phase of experimentation where you can't also foresee everything that you have to align on from day one. Some of it will come out from as a result of experimentation, and you'll be like, oh, well, you guys did this. Why so? So during those initial phases where the stakes are really low, when you're just kind of doing some quick experimentation there, maybe a week or a sprint long, which is like 2 weeks, and you're coming back and you're kind of evaluating, you're bringing those results to the table, and you're kind of discussing like, are we on the right path? Do we have a signal that this is actually going to work? And the team is like, no, because we did X. And I think that's, again, an opportunity for you to pick up and you say like, okay, well, that's not what I meant. Again, the stakes are still low in the initial stages of that product for you to align. But once you start to gain momentum and you've gotten the signal and you start to scale that product to, let's say, enterprise level, it's probably better that you have spent that first couple of weeks aligning and ironing out all of those wrinkles so the team can really run. And everyone's kind of, again, on the same page. And so when a stakeholder comes in, let's say a leader, and says like, okay, well, now it would be great if we could do X and Y and Z, or now we have to shift direction, everyone kind of understands the same language. And then they understand the impact that that's going to have on the direction, let's say, of that initiative, of the product, of the implementation, and things like that. So totally worth the investment, and doing that early, I think is really strategic as well.
Yeah. And it's not a waste of resources, I would say. It's a must thing. Okay. So thank you for this really deep answer. And I want to move to another thing. And when companies start with AI, everyone gets really excited about what it might do. Yeah.
Yes.
But it's super important to be realistic about what's possible, what is not, and how long things can take in time. Yeah. And managing these expectations is the key. So, Lana, how do you manage people's expectation when you start the AI project? And what do you think it is important to keeping things realistic?
So I think the hype has damaged, I think, people's expectations a little bit, because, they kind of see this as an exponential kind of solve every potential use case type of technology, but that's not the case. And so I think, again, some of that leadership literacy is really important to understand, okay, well, these are the types of things that AI can be used for, and these are the types of things that cannot be used for. So as an example, so you cannot expect, let's say, AI is powered by data. So just the fact that you have data doesn't mean that you have a use case for AI. And I'll give you a good demonstration for an example where AI should not be used. So as one example is lottery. So we have a lot of data, right? We kind of collect every iteration of kind of, again, the selection of numbers, but there is no kind of trends that you can pick because it is completely randomized. So it's basically a flip of a coin. You can either get like a 7 or a 10 or whatever. So it is very random. So there's no other factors that are at play in that data to really explain how likely are you going to win in that round, or what are going to be the winning numbers, because there's no predictability in the derivation of that data. You have to have some explainability factor in order for to build an effective AI solution. So again, flip of a coin, races, and things like that. So again, anything that has this chance factor is not a good use case for AI, even though you have tons of data. So you have to kind of evaluate, well, is this something that you could explain over time? And that's going to be actually the usage of users with that particular product. Will that improve the the quality of the recommendations or whatever over time? So you have to kind of be realistic in expectations of, well, what can AI do, and then what types of things can it be used for, and then what types of things it cannot be used for. So one other thing is I would say it's just, we need AI, let's just throw it at the data and then figure it out. Not a great use case also for AI, because again, AI is not going to help figure out an objective that you're trying to solve. You have to start with an objective, try to find data, and then build a solution around that objective. You don't start with the technology, throw lots of data at it, and then figure out like, okay, well, here are some potential use cases that you could tackle this for. There's just a lot more, I think, strategic thinking that's upfront. And again, just because it handles a lot of data doesn't mean that it should be helping you solve or figure out use cases for your organization. And there was a third one that's like escaping me, but yeah, so I think it comes down to understanding, okay, the capabilities, starting with the objectives. So what is the objective that you're trying to solve? So one good use case or one good starting point is understanding what processes currently exist. And there's, different indicators for where AI could really play a role. And you kind of can probably have heard of it, where there's a lot of data. These are repetitive tasks. There are things that can, if you add more indicators to it, it can actually improve your kind of recommendation. So as an example, product recommendation. So when people purchase something on Amazon, the fact that they're purchasing an item can be an indicator that they like this particular type of person, but it also informs the type of segment that customer belongs to. They'll be like, okay, well, these two profiles are really similar. Can we take additional data from this other profile who has been on the platform for a bit more time and better the recommendation of this newer profile that just kind of made a transaction? So it becomes almost, again, like the beauty of AI is that it's exponential, and you can add more qualifiers and then better those recommendations over time. So one thing, and then maybe just something to think about, is that we're not at the level of intelligence where, again, AI is automatic and can help you do things automatically. So what AI is really great at is handling a lot of data. So, and I think I've read this example, which I really, really like. AI is really great at handling a lot of data and like solving for, let's say, logistic regression. So it's just dealing with a lot of data, a lot of mathematics. Humans do not have the capacity to really understand, but we know how to make coffee. And to us, it seems like a very, very simple task, but it's a very complicated multi-step process for an AI solution to figure out at this point. So think about AI as a point solution which needs objective, that you have to kind of align the right data. And so there's a lot of like human in the loop still part of the planning process that I feel like people don't underestimate, because again, they think, oh, well, AI is smart, it'll figure it out. But they underscore the part that there's planning and a lot of like human in the loop work that happens even before. And a lot of the AI systems that we use today involved a lot of human effort in actually designing and developing these systems. AI did not figure these things out on their own to make sure that they basically get to a quality of the results of those recommendations. There's a lot of humans that were involved in qualifying or quality assurance kind of practices enabled to make sure that before it actually goes into production, that humans are aligned with the recommendations or the quality that it's putting out. So you can't anticipate every edge case, but there's just a lot of involvement from the humans that is in the loop, and which is why it's so important to have SMEs who are really experienced in the AI space that can take the business objective. So take the objective and then help guide the team to a solution and then oversee that implementation to a success. So I think those are really key to understand that, AI is just not this independent, general intelligence type of system at this point yet, and humans are very much required in the process.
Yeah, and this reminds me the previous episode I had with David Matachunas, and we were talking about one specific problem or challenge of AI is the reasoning. So basically, if the
Yes.
reasoning would be solved, so might be we can find out new discoveries, but we cannot do it at the moment because AI on itself can start thinking and reasoning
Yes.
things and showing us what we don't know about the data. But until that moment,
Hmm.
data should have some specific direction, what to do with that data or what we're expecting from the data. And those movies, I don't know the exact name of that movie, where the older guy kind of cracked the code of lottery and he
Oh,
started to, he calculated somehow. I'm not sure. I didn't watch that movie, but I saw a lot of trailers of that movie. And he kind of solved how he can win the lottery and he started to win. So it's
what?
more science
Fuck.
fiction. It's science
Yes.
fiction. It's not reality. So yeah, you can try it, but at least not at this moment. We can find out the solution for the randomized things. So I would say,
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I'd love to emphasize because I really like that point is that all of AI systems at this point cannot reason beyond the data. So they cannot come up with new factors that are at play here and try to explain the behavior. So these systems are designed based on the data that they're trained on, large language models included, because people think of them as like these creative beings and like they can create new concepts, new ideas. But if you kind of, again, take their generated responses and the output, they're basically connecting different concepts that they've been trained on, that they've been exposed to in unique and novel ways.
it was already created by humans, and those concepts were trained. That's it, and they just
Exactly.
coming up with the new ways of representing the same concept. So
Exactly. Or they're combining, you can apply different
yeah, yeah.
frameworks on top of that data. Or let's say one of the things that's beautiful about AI is that, they have one thing that we do not is capacity.
Mhm.
For this infinite amount of knowledge, right? We are limited by our own experiences. And so we may or may not come up with these novel concepts, and which is kind of what research drives, is being able to create new ideas, or connecting new concepts. So let's say maybe AI and biology, some completely disparate concepts. So if we weren't exposed to it, so if you were not like a trained chemist, it would be hard for you to relate a concept within AI to like a chemical concept, right? But AI can, because it has a world of knowledge, and you can be like, hey, why don't you connect this concept in a creative way to something in the field of chemistry and come up with a new novel way of thinking. Again, it does not go beyond the knowledge that it's been trained on. It just takes the existing data that it's been exposed to and connects it into different ways. And I think this is where I think you were kind of talking about reasoning. So we're not there yet where AI can create this new novel ways of thinking beyond its trained data and say like, hey, this is a new innovative way or like a new field of science. It's just basically, again, connecting the dots. And same thing with machine learning and other systems. They're prediction machines. So they're taking the existing data, you're layering on top of them the algorithms that explain kind of patterns in that data. And then you're basically giving it new scenarios. And it basically takes that algorithm, that kind of line, and it says, okay, based on this, it looks like the output is going to be that, but that algorithm is completely built on the historical data. When people say, AI is creative, I do think it is creative and it can create new concepts, but it is very much limited by things or concepts that we as humans have developed. So,
Or
um,
even we know because sometimes it looks like we don't, oh, this is really genius, but somebody already created this and we just don't know this. And it looks like
yeah,
oh, it creating something new for us, maybe. But for those who knows these processes behind it or who even trained, they
yes.
just, oh, okay, yeah, it works like we expected. So,
Exactly. Yeah. But I think it's important to understand that these models are prediction machines. So you
yeah.
want the data, or you want to apply AI to things where you can be successful in developing a prediction. So you don't just throw random data and like lots of data. So you have to be very on the hands-on on the process to make sure that you also don't overfit. And again, there's practices to make sure that you're not overfitting the algorithms to the underlying data, to make sure that it's like when you give it new scenarios, it doesn't just stall, because it's like, oh, we only have this prediction and now you gave us an edge case that we don't know how to handle. So you want to make sure that you have data, but you have to handpick that data too. So again, going to the expectations, like you can't just say like, oh, we have this data warehouse and we're going to throw AI at it, then it's going to help us figure things out. It doesn't work that way. So there's very much a lot of hands-on engineering discussions that happen in order to make sure that you craft a solution in a way that works.
This reminded me the simple scenario, what basically everyone can use at the moment, like custom GPTs. We were warning everyone, like, be careful with custom GPTs. They are really vulnerable. You can social hack GPTs. And by the way, I love it, that game, when you're trying to, like take the candy from the robot and just get the data. And trust me, I got a lot of interesting data from some of the GPTs. I didn't even imagine what people just throwing all that data into GPTs and thinking what they will somehow figure out how it will work, especially when custom GPTs come out to the public. And everybody became AI engineers or AI creators, like they say.
Experts.
And I checked this and I was so surprised. People just pushing their books, what they wrote previously. And the instruction is just one sentence, and AI needs to figure it out what to do with that book. The book is not instructions. It's just a bunch of data. And GPT kind of work the right way if you ask the right questions. And of course, the author asks the right questions because he knows or she knows their content, but in reality, it doesn't work. People don't know what to ask. And this is is where you need to lead people and to explain and give the instructions how to use that book or whatever you created previously. So it needs adaptation. I'm just saying this way. So.
Yeah, and I think with GPTs also what's important, and I think I'm surprised actually that you're still seeing that, because there are ways to protect GPTs you create, where you add system prompts so that someone, like you, cannot reverse prompt it to give up its instructions. So just want you to,
when somebody is prompting, we even are incorporating some marketing messages to get those people back to us. And okay, if you're hacking or trying to get, just write us and we will share everything you want. So there are some creative ways how to use these loopholes or how to attract people who are trying to get deeper into the code. And by the way, we shared this, I think, in December last year. Till now, I'm testing some of the new GPTs that come up in the market, like a magic pills, and they're just open it. I'm just copying the same instructions and getting everything what's inside. With some, you need to play more, but it's possible. Some of them quite good protected now, and that's good. So I'm happy.
Which is the fact that you're even talking about it, I feel like it's probably, getting people anxious, like especially executive leaders and leaders anxious. The fact that you could just reverse engineer kind of the prompts or kind of what's behind some of these GPTs. And then again, there's ways to secure it. I think you have to, again, for these types of things, to make sure that you kind of implement these systems correctly, you have to bring SMEs. So should those GPT owners have had an SME who really understands kind of the data security, they would have known better before releasing some of these GPTs.
Or at least you use privately or somewhere, but don't push it to public. Or use the AI assistant through APIs where you can at least control data, what's coming in and going out, etc.
Yeah, and then there's like a concept of like unintended consequences, right? So like there's things that, or edge cases that, come up when you build out the solution. If you're inexperienced, and this is why, again, those mentors and SMEs are so important, you bring in experienced people who can anticipate. And so like part of like the quality assurance, if you will, or part of like the testing that goes out before you even push it to production or push it to public, you want to make sure that it kind of goes through the pressure test of people who, again, I will emphasize this, people who have the experience of building these systems, testing these systems, and deploying them into production. So to avoid things like what you're talking about, Martin, from happening.
At least don't put all your data about your company. Plus, if you're using just the plus version of GPT, ChatGPT, that data, now it's official. They training their LLMs on your data, and sometimes it can pop up in some context. Except if they say, if you're using the business plan, that data won't be used for the training of general large language models. So this is really important to know. And please read all the terms and conditions of these LLMs. I don't know whether you're reading them, but it's important to understand how your data is going in and out.
No, I think that's really important.
All right, so I want to move, you already tackled this question, but I want to just little bit come back to this one. So before businesses can use AI, they need to be clear about what problems they're trying to solve.
Yeah.
And this means really understand the issue and being able to explain it well. And this helps make sure what AI can do, what the business needs. And what are some of the best ways you're found for businesses to clearly describe the problems when they are looking to use AI, and why it is so important?
Yeah, and I think it comes down to, so with the business executives and just business leaders at a high level, every organization has two pieces. They have a business model and then they have an operating model. Business model dictates how you create value for your users, so basically your business. And then the operating model is how do you deliver that value to those end consumers and those businesses. And so when you're talking about AI and potentially identifying use cases, you kind of have to speak that language. So business model basically looks at the ways, the products, the systems that you have in place in order to create value for your business. And the operating model is how efficiently are you running that business in order to deliver that value to your consumer. Basic equation is that you want to increase the business model value. So you want to increase the value for the organization that drives top line growth, which is through revenues. And then you want to do that at the least amount of cost, which is what you want to do to increase the efficiencies, but decrease the operating cost for the organization. So you start there. And so if you kind of think about, okay, well, what's important to your business and what are your business objectives? So at the beginning of each year, pretty traditionally that the organization kind of set the objectives for their year. In order for us to improve our business or to drive top line growth, we have the following objectives, and they can be broken out into big themes, which then the way that it typically works, and they would delegate that to the different business verticals. And then the business verticals translate that to how it impacts the work that they do. You kind of have to start there and start to say, well, okay, well, let's focus on the business objectives. Let's start with one. So especially if AI is new to the organization. And one of the things to focus on, and you'll kind of read a lot about the use cases, but where you see a lot of use cases emerge right now is in the efficiency space. So you have creating new business value, and then you have creating your efficiency. So this is where you're kind of using ChatGPT for marketing to streamline work in the call centers and all kinds of things, because those are low-hanging fruits. And what that enables you to do, build stamina, build practice, and then build experience. So not that the new initiatives don't matter as much, but you actually don't want to be running your first use case AI, failing and saying, hey, AI is really not a great value add, because by definition, creating new value is a much more time-consuming process for you to ideate what that new value is for the organization, to actually create new solutions, design thinking, and bring in different organizations to really get some new novel perspectives into that. Just the lead time to create new business value is just significantly lower. So when you talk about AI and starting with kind of getting started in AI, yes, it's probably not the biggest value and the competitive advantage for you to focus on efficiencies. But if you can spend the next 3 months focusing on driving efficiencies within your organization through enabling AI, and this could be, again, ChatGPT enablement is the low-hanging fruit. So how can you introduce ChatGPT across the marketing department? And then you give them the use cases, you give them the training for how to use and what kind of data they can be uploading it. If you have, the enterprise plan, you have other consideration for training, but you kind of start with the process, maybe a single vertical, and then you measure success. One problem that I see right now, and kind of just in industry creators in general, people are just kind of saying like, oh, well, you need to adopt AI into your business workflows. Don't wait for your leadership to start those initiatives, and that's really problematic because for measurement standpoint. So how do you measure impact of AI when it's driven bottom up? Like you have all of these people on the ground actually, using AI, but you have no way of understanding what they use it for. And then you don't have any way to measure it. Again, being strategic and starting at the top. So driving these initiatives top to bottom to say, here's the efficiencies that we're looking to introduce. Here's the business vertical. Here are some use cases where AI could be implemented. Here's some tools that we can enable. And this is what we would measure success. And then there's ROI behind those investments that you could also measure to say like, okay, well, for a call center, they've been using AI or automated chatbots through our platform for the last 3 months. It saved an average 8 hours a week per employee, let's say. You times that by kind of the hours work for that 3 months, times it by the average per hour salary, you get your ROI. That's the amount of money you've saved because those people who you've saved time, they could be doing other things. So maybe they, instead of focusing on low tier support, they can be focused on higher tier support, or maybe they've picked up more strategy, or maybe they've picked up other things within the business that can actually deliver more innovative value. But I think the key piece to it is that you have to start at the top with the objectives, with how they actually translate to the ground, which verticals or which use cases are impacted, and then creating some metrics, some success metrics for what would define success in us doing it. And then you do an ROI. So how much money have you invested in the solution? And how much money are you saving through that for the efficiencies process? How much money is this actually saving you in the year or in that time frame? And is that impactful for you? And then once you kind of build that muscle of doing this AI, then you can consider doing AI use cases within creating new business value, because that will, again, it's new, unique, innovative, probably hasn't been done before. You can't just like go and peek at another organization's use case and say like, oh, I wonder how you guys did this innovation. Like that typically is held behind like closed curtains, like no one's going to share that. But for efficiencies, there's just so many use cases. You can pick up, I don't know, browse on LinkedIn or anywhere, use cases for efficiencies in marketing. You're going to get tons of use cases you can get ideas from for how you could, again, bulletproof your implementation, I want to say, like, or foolproof your implementation without like really running into a lot of hiccups through the process.
When we talk about, when you said pushing initiatives from top to bottom, I see one thing. I don't know, it's somehow stick in my head, and I wanted to. We didn't plan to talk about this, so we can just a little bit tackle this. But what do you think? And especially now when AI come into the town, and some people sitting in their jobs, positions, some people are afraid of AI. And they're thinking, oh, if I will start using AI, I will lose my job because AI will do most of the job for me. And this is what I hear, especially when somebody from the top is pushing these initiatives, but not inspiring and empowering employees to use it for specific goal. Yeah, maybe defining goals need to have some definition, maybe for employees. What will be out of this for you if this will work?
Yes.
Because sometimes I see opportunities for employees to sabotage that process. And top level management will see it. Oh, we implemented this project, it didn't help. But maybe somewhere in between where people still are involved, they don't want to do it. How to solve this problem, or how to identify at least what you have that problem? What do you think? Is it a thing to talk about?
Yeah, and I think it's a multifaceted maybe question there, but I think maybe a few angles to kind of put there. So we know for a fact that AI is going to disrupt jobs or replace certain jobs that are specifically very automated. So things that where you were entering data into the database, and that was kind of the task, you could totally automate that. We're already seeing QA, so people who have provided quality assurance in the manufacturing plants to make sure that the quality of, I don't know, vases, cups, whatever is manufactured is on par. That could be replaced by computer vision. So we know for a fact that AI is already replacing things that are quite repetitive. So I think there's two sides of the coin here. So I think that there's a responsibility for the workers to recognize that, hey, my job is quite repetitive. So maybe I should consider learning or upskilling into something else that is close to what I already do. And that's a responsibility that you kind of have to take on as well, just kind of anticipating change and take that responsibility. But I also kind of anticipation that, hey, once AI is introduced, a lot of my time is going to be freed up. So what am I going to do with that time? How can I provide value back to the organization with that freed up time? And the other flip of that side of the coin is for leadership to also own the responsibility to say, hey, I have this workforce that is going to be, and I'm going to automate a lot of that work. So it's a decision to make whether you provide efficiencies through, letting people go and automating those processes or shifting them to new job functions. So is there something that they could be doing more of with their skill sets that they can provide, again, more business values, and they have those skills to be able to do it? One thing that I'll kind of say that maybe another deeper angle to this is the fact that people also fear that AI is going to make us more stupid in a way, because they're now going to take these tasks. They're going to be more creative in generating, marketing output and things like that. But I think I would challenge that to say, I think it's going to push us very similar to not they're automating pieces of our workflow, even if they're creative tasks, which push us to do more, to push us to the new limits, to actually to be more creative, to be more innovative. So they free up our mind space from things that are already been figured out. You now spend time on creating new ideas that these AI systems can be now trained on. So think about also an example of without AI and I actually just did a quick research for the time that it happened before AI's time, in the 1950s. People were basically saying, hey, a 4-minute mile is non-existent. No one can do it. It's humanly impossible for people to just kind of do a 4-minute mile. People were training for it. Everyone was coming in during these world kind of competition. Everyone was coming in over 5 minutes, 6 minutes, or whatever. That was just kind of the standard. But people have been running for a long time competitively, right? This is not new concept. So in 1954, Roger Bannister ran the first 1 mile in 3 minutes and 59 seconds.
You have that information on your screen right now?
Yes. And guess what happened afterwards? Do you think that he was the only one?
No.
People didn't change. They didn't become mutated all of a sudden. It just opened up the possibility in people's head that, hey, 4-minute mile is actually possible. We can actually we can push ourselves to new limits, because I think we're kind of caught up with these kind of preconceived notions, and it's actually stopping us from innovating further. If you kind of think about this as a blessing in disguise, yes, you're going to be automating jobs, but what AI kind of is doing behind the scenes is actually pushing us to the new limits of what we think, oh, well, I don't think we can ever get more creative than we are with art or music. I think we can. Now AI is freeing us up, freeing our brain capacity from doing things that we've already figured out, so that we can spend more time creating new innovations to train AI or, and things like that. So I think it's again, maybe a deeper angle than probably your question was anticipating, but maybe worth people kind of asking. So how do you prep for that next step of innovation? So if your job is going to be automated, how can you, what skills can you gain, about AI, or how can you augment your workflow with AI? How can you use it creatively to create more business value in unique ways for your organization? And that's what I think is going to matter.
I would like to add one thing, because I was involved in EdTech for 10 or more years, and I had my own free for businesses in EdTech. What AI brings on the table, what the boring times of education is almost over, because now people can start learning in more interactive way. more
Yeah.
customized way, specifically adapted to specific person. And this is what they are missing. Like, oh my God, I need to learn it. It will be boring. It's like in school. No, it can be like a TV show with your beloved characters and actors or whatever. I shared a week ago, I think, like millennials, how they are learning now mathematics. What is the most boring thing ever? I had mathematics studies in my university and in college, in school. It was boring. I understood it, but it was boring. And now Joe Biden can have a beef with Trump, and in between, they talk about mathematics. Of course, they are not real, it's deep fakes, but if you bring
Hmm.
some cringe into the learning environment, it
Yeah.
becomes totally interesting. You start thinking, oh, I want to understand what they're talking about. And with the jokes and with the funny aspect to education, you can put into people's mind the information they need. For me, it was one of the things I was really passionate about, to understand how I can extract, first of all, information from the expert's head to
Hmm.
get the concept of the information, and then duplicate that information and put into other head. But other head is different because the person has different skill sets. This is different personality. They understand and consume information differently. They have different level of education, and etc. and etc. A lot of factors. And I
Yeah.
saw in the future we will have ability to combine those two together. And by the way, I'm currently working on some of similar projects. It's
Wow.
amazing, and it's amazing, and I see a lot of these similar projects are popping up. So if somebody hears us who thinks what their jobs will be automated and like, oh, I need to learn something new and it will be boring, no, AI brings opportunities to learn something new in the new ways. So I encourage you to look for these, options in the market.
Absolutely. I would totally agree.
The last thing I wanted to ask you, if you have time, check
Yes.
you
Yep.
have time. Yeah. Okay.
A few minutes. Yep.
Yeah. So every AI project teaches us something. Yeah. And whatever it works out or not, learning from both the wins and the losses can help make future projects better.
Yes.
So looking back at your experience, Lana, what have you learned from AI projects? What went well and those what didn't? How can these lessons help others?
And I think there's just multiple. I think you don't jump into technology first, as I've already kind of spoke about, just because AI is a shiny object that everyone wants in the organization doesn't mean you start there. You're just gonna build a project that no one really wants, and I've seen that actually happen. With either not my own implementation, but I actually met with vendors who they've spent millions, a lot of money in building up and a very robust AI solution, but they don't have a product market fit. There's not a need for it specifically in the enterprise. And, one of the things that they've spent a lot of time without customers in mind and bringing them on the journey alongside with them, that yeah, they end up kind of try to like really rush into these implementations, and then over time no one's buying them, and then their implementation costs are basically for the software are through the roof because they have to recoup those costs too. So that's something that I would advise. Why kind of again objective to kind of looking at the problems to be solved is so important, is and bringing users along on the journey to validate your output, even with again some of the projects that I oversee through my work, is every time that we iterate on the solutions, we bring in the users that are going to basically be and the end consumers of that product, because you want to make sure that there's adoption. If people are not adopting your product, you're never going to get value from it. You want to make sure that you involve users. You don't just bring technology and try to retrofit it into people's like processes. And the other thing is a big learning is trying to retrofit AI into an existing process instead of over rethinking that entire process. So I have a story on LinkedIn for if people are curious and kind of reading about this, but I want to say like in the late 1800s, there was a boat called Savannah, and there was a new technology, of these steam engines that was developed at the time. And so this company decided to retrofit that steam engine on just a regular sailboat. And they're like, oh, we're going to go across the ocean, from America to, let's say, to Europe, and we're going to make do. Well, it didn't work. I think it gave up halfway, and they ended up going on their sails the rest of their way. So sometimes retrofitting the solution into a process will not drive the significant business impact that you're hoping to get, because you're really limiting it by the underlying process and all the other components that you have in that workflow. So I think when you're thinking of investing AI, I think it's an opportunity for you to rethink that whole entire workflow. So re-architecting those solutions. And I think the last one that I'll kind of leave with is experimentation mindset. Don't underscore just the fact that AI has been around for, I don't know, dozens of years. LLMs and other approaches are still new. There's new techniques and approaches that are developed each time. And you can't expect from even the business leader standpoint that like, hey, we're going to give this project 3 months to really like pan out and see how much value you can deliver. It doesn't always work that way. And you can't always promise. This is not a rule-based implementation. Like, hey, you're going to get this much value by the end of this implementation, because there's a lot of experimentation that happens. There's different approaches that the teams are really trying. And so the best way to look at the value delivered is incremental value. For instead of saying like, in order for us to recoup this cost, we have to get $90 million back, I don't know, in 3 months or whatever, to paint the efficiencies. Well, what if you looked at incremental value? So you said for every 1% improvement in the efficiencies, that equals to $1 million. If you give me 5% improvement, that's $5 million. And so that also kind of, I want to say, de-risks that process. So instead of expecting people and surely failing the whole entire initiative to say, like, unless it hits the $90 million mark, initiative is a failure. Embrace experimentation and then frame up these ROIs and instead in format of incremental improvement that you can expect, and you can measure successes and value out of that. Yeah, I think those would be the 3 examples that I would leave you with.
The last one really reminds me, I talked with traditional business owner and he said, hey, will it triple my sales in a specific period of months? I said, no, I don't think so. Oh, so no, I won't invest. I won't do anything at all. Like he will stand better now and wait till somebody else will figure out the way. After you triple, you can quadruple and you take the market really fast. So yeah. People do not need to sleep right now and think about it and think like you offer it in incremental events. So this is the best way to understand how AI works. So Lana, thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you for sharing your knowledge, your expertise, and thank you everyone who joined us on the AI Master's Voice. If you watched till the end, don't forget to like and leave a comment behind the video. I believe Lana will join and answer your questions. I will, of course, review and answer your questions. And don't forget to click the bell button so you will be notified about our new episodes. And thank you for watching. Thank you for being with us, and see you soon. Bye-bye.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.